Right, our next guest represents one of the most remarkable success stories in digital content creation and entrepreneurship, not just in the UK, but across the globe. He's the manager of the Sidemen and co-founder of Arcade Media, a Forbes 30 under 30, a member of 10 Downing Street's SME Council and advisor and investor for multiple startups. Behind the Sidemen's extraordinary growth is his strategic thinking, his innovative deal. Did you write this? It's good, isn't it? Innovative. It's true, though. It's all true. It's actually true. And we're going to find out by picking his brain in a second now. Is innovative deal making, a deep understanding of both the creator landscape and traditional media, which most recently landed Arcade Media with a 7-figure investment from Lumina Media. So please join me in welcoming the formidable Jordan Schwarzenberger. Come up, Jordan. Thank you, mate. That's good. Do you want to go to the further end? Is that okay? Cool. All very true, John. I was only pulling your leg.
Nice.
Yeah,
Very
and
kind.
I've been. If anybody hasn't had a chance to listen to Jordan sit down with Amal Rajan recently on his podcast, then after you've been inspired by this conversation, go and do that as well, because it's really interesting stuff you've got to say, Jordan. Now, there might be some people in the room who aren't necessarily aware of the Sidemen's work. I don't think there's many, but just briefly, just so that we can cover that base off, and then we can get into the interesting stuff. Tell us about the journey to this point.
Yeah, well, firstly, thanks for having me. Is this one on? Should I use this, the handheld?
Let's have a look. Which one do we prefer?
Which
The
one's better?
handheld or
This
the...
one?
The
Handheld,
handheld.
okay,
might
fine.
be, yeah, great.
Fine. So thank you for having me. Yeah, so the Sidemen, I mean, it's a story that goes back now, I mean, this is year 11 that the Sidemen have been doing this. And even before then, as individuals, probably about 12, 13 years. So they were really at the sort of heart of scrappy YouTube back in, I guess, the early 2010s and even before that, right? I mean, they were literally just kids at school making videos, you know, when they got home, playing games, doing funny challenges individually. And then they landed on a game called GTA 5, which is obviously, you know, the biggest entertainment brand of all time. It's still going strong to this day, and the numbers are bigger, I think, than any other IP ever created, GTA. And it's funny that actually that still GTA 6 hasn't come out, and the Sidemen started that 11 years ago, right? That was the sort of the birth of it.
I think it's made more money than Bond.
It's the biggest entertainment IP of all time. Not many people know that, but they were playing that together, and then they made videos individually and then as a group, and that sort of turned into this server called the Ultimate Sidemen, is what the name was, and that was them and a bunch of friends who would come in and out and play together. They filmed it, they put it online, and then an audience came. And this is when YouTube really was in its sort of scrappy days. You could put literally anything up, and you probably get, if it was decent, 50,000, 100,000 views. No one was really watching or caring beyond the sort of YouTube bubble. And that then expanded into more consistency, then playing more games together. And then that then transcended into, let's make some in-person videos, and then let's do bigger collaborations. And then that then evolved into the Sidemen channel that you know today. And yeah, that's been going now, I think, about 7 or 8 years as a channel. Before then, they were also collaborating as the Sidemen. And yeah, Sidemen Sunday, which is their sort of regular tentpole show. I mean, I'm sure maybe some of you have seen it. If you haven't, I'm sure your kids will be watching it. You know, and they're pulling in, you know, 7 to 8 million views a week pretty consistently now for the last sort of 8-9 years together, and that's expanded from that into then this partnership with us. So we came in 2021. They had one employee at the time, Tanya, who was, you know, amazing, and she's sort of been leading on Sidemen Sunday the whole way through. And now we're a team of, I think, 50 people in Sidemen Entertainment. We've got 6 businesses. We've got a VC fund, a restaurant, and all different things that we can get into today. Yeah. So yeah, it's been a lot of fun.
And so recently it's been about broadening the leverage of their success and their popularity to do other things, right? So it's not, so I suppose this idea, sometimes we think of content creation or television in sort of silos, or we make TV shows. That's what we do. Whereas you're proof now that actually you need to think differently. You're making stuff that sometimes works on Netflix, sometimes works on YouTube, in different places.
100%. I think what epitomizes the Sidemen and also just YouTubers, the fun of it all really, is that you build a connection with an audience. I mean, for me, that was brought to life when the first time I met them, I was working at Sport Bible, Lab Bible at the time. It was 2016, and it was the first Sidemen charity match. I remember remember going down there. I don't know if anyone knows what the Sidemen charity match is. And yeah, so the first one, very different to the one we just had in Wembley, sold out Wembley in March this year. It was like, I think, the fastest selling football match of all time. Football's debatable. It wasn't really football, but it was still, we'll take it. We'll take the world record. But back in 2016, Southampton Council was in St. Mary's. They only let them have one stand because they said, like, who are these? I mean, imagine a bunch of like kids going to Southampton and saying, yeah, we want to rent out your football stadium. Obviously, they said, no, you can do it, but you only get one stand. We're not getting the police involved and all of that. Anyway, they sold the stand out in, I think, 90 seconds. So it was like 13,000 people. This was the first ever time they'd done it. And I remember going there for Sport Bible when I was covering it and being down at the touchline and seeing all these, and just being absolutely blown away by the level of connection that you could just feel in the air. And at the end of the game, and yes, the council and the police were right to probably not let them have it, all of the kids and their parents and their grandparents stormed the pitch, right, at the end. They flooded down. And I remember being like, what's going on? This is crazy. And all they wanted to do was touch, smell, probably taste any of these guys on the pitch. And it was the parents, it was the grandparents as well, it was everybody, right, and the kids. And there was this level of connection there that made me realize, okay, YouTube is totally different. And I remember we got like corralled into the touchline, into the sort of dugout, and these big bodyguards were like holding the doors back because you could see the doors being knocked down by these people trying to get in, again, just to touch and be close to these YouTubers. And then I remember we get pulled into the coach, and the coach goes down Southampton's strip, if you will. And you turned around outside the coach, like, hold on a minute. There are kids running from the stadium to the hotel, again, just to be close to them. I think about 6 of them ran about 1.5 miles. And these are kids, 10, 11 years old. And you just realize, okay, this level of connection is just so deep. So when you have that connection, you can provide value in infinite amounts of ways, right? As long as you know your audience. So I think it's a totally different way of looking at it, where you've got the 7 of them, their friendship, that's the glue of the whole thing. You've got content, which is the engine room, but then you can build a whole world of IP and value around that, and that can spin out into, anything really, whether it's restaurants, cereal, alcohol, whether it's membership clubs, whether it's, charity matches, Netflix, whatever it is.
Yeah. Do you think that you just caught, or that they just caught lightning in a bottle with their chemistry and what they were doing? Or were there lessons from their journey that you think anybody can apply to any project that they're working on?
I mean, look, obviously with all these things, right, there's a little bit of, there's a magic within them that makes it sustainable and keeps it going for 7 years. I mean, I always say the variables that are made to make the Sidemen work, make them work in a way that others don't have. I mean, even things like, being the scale they are right now, it means that they make enough money from it, ultimately, to keep it going in a way that many others can't. So they'd probably be doing their own individual things. Also, 7 of them, perfect number. Every decision is literally a WhatsApp poll, and then you get a vote. And if it gets to 4, then it's yes. I mean, it's the weirdest kind of coming together of sort of efficiency meets creativity with them that makes it work and makes it tick along. So, no, there is a definite magic with them, for sure. And they are genuine friends. Like, they have been doing this for a long time. They like each other. Half the fun for them is just showing up with their mates because they just get to, make funny videos and do what they do. But no, there are absolutely lessons that anyone can take. I think the biggest one is the consistency. To keep it going for 11 years that's a testament to them and their ability to, A, stay friends and not fall out, but also to be consistent and diligent around what they do and to build structures. The way that they hold each other account is, I think, really powerful. I mean, always with these things, right? Somebody like JJ KSI, when he was building his music career, he could have kind of gone off and done that and, taken on America and everything else, but he was always held accountable in the same way that all the others were in the group to make sure that the whole thing ran and stayed afloat. So, no, I think they're brilliant and they do what they do in a way that's quite unique, but actually the lessons are pretty universal. And also the idea of risk-taking. The biggest thing about them, and the reason why we've been able to do what we've done together and have success together in a very strong partnership, is because they just say yes to stuff in a very good way. If it makes sense, they go for it. They don't wait around. And I think Josh, who's probably the most, I'd say, systems-minded of the group, he always has, I think it still is pinned tweet, which is evolve or be extinct. And I think it sums up a lot of what we'll probably talk about today, right? But his mindset is constant adaptation. And that's why they've never stayed still. Every time you think, this is going to like chill out a little bit, then there's something totally new that comes around, like Inside was, and we can talk about that in a bit. But yeah, I think the evolution element, the adaptation, all of those things, totally universal, and I think more important now than ever, actually.
And have you been afraid to fail, or not afraid to fail, perhaps is a better way of saying, when it comes to an evolution or a change, and they take a risk? Because not everything works all of the time, right?
Of course, yeah, no, 100%. I mean, we just genuinely try stuff all the time. I mean, like randomly in 2023, 23, sorry, Christmas. I don't know if anyone, you probably don't remember this, but we had these videos. It was like a cheap versus expensive Christmas song. And then one of the songs started to do all right. And this was like 2 or 3 weeks out of the chart on Christmas week. And so literally, I think it'd been out for 2 weeks, 3 weeks already. And we just put in the group, oh, do you want to, like, they were like, oh, should we go for a number one? And we're like, oh, well, we can try. So we put the team around it, gave it a go, did a music video, did HMV signings. I really pushed it and just gave it a try. Ended up getting number 3. Thank you very much in the official charts. Number 1 on global. Beat Mariah Carey at Christmas. So nothing comes
That's
close to that.
Top of your CV. That's top of your CV.
Nothing beats it, right? But things like that where you go, who else would just, I mean, they threw, I think, 100K or something into a market. It was like, we put together a plan. So guys, it'll cost about 100 grand to give it a proper go. Didn't even flinch. We were like, yeah, let's try. And then you get number 3, and it's just a fun extra tick for the list of things that we've done. So I think that sort of sums them up, really. And no, there's there's definitely no fear of failure. But then also it's putting in the right amount of risk. And again, we can get into things like investment and capital and how much money they put into things and where they place their bets. Because I think that sort of, that shows a lot about the risk, the nature of risk that we take, because it is quite considered.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's also fun.
I'm sure we'll touch on the business side of things. So we'll have hopefully about 10 minutes at the end for some questions as well. So if you think of anything you want to ask Jordan, we'll have a chance to do that towards the end. Just before I'd like to move on to talk about how you think the lessons that you guys have learned from your experiences can apply to the television landscape as it kind of is. A couple more thoughts on what you're up to at the moment. In terms of, you talked about the lack of fear of failure, you've also talked previously about a lack of fear of embarrassment, which is a lot of us, especially sometimes it's a Welsh thing. So sometimes you don't want to put yourself out there because you don't want to embarrass yourself a little bit. Whereas you and the lads, that does not apply.
Yeah, I think that YouTube, by nature, right, you're putting out hundreds of videos, thousands of videos of yourself, sometimes doing things you probably shouldn't be doing, sometimes in quite vulnerable states, whatever it might be. So you get used, I think, to, just being out there. And actually that in and of itself is a good skill set, I think, for all of us to have more of. I think creators are quite well built in that they are used to just putting themselves out there and getting criticism constantly. I mean, you'll know, right, the nature of social media. And I think actually for everybody, there's a lot of benefit in that mindset, especially when it's driven around your creativity, because not only can you iterate with feedback constantly because you're always getting checked, but even on YouTube, right, the very nature of the platform is that you have a 1 out of 10 rating for your video. So the minute it goes up, the minute you see, did this absolutely flop and waste everyone's time or money? Is it a 10 out of 10 or is it a 1? Is it a 2? Is it a 3? Plus the comments, plus the likes, you get this immediate sense of feedback. And I think as a result, embarrassment, as long as you're doing great creative work, which the Sidemen in the team are always priding themselves on doing, and you're doing things to the best of your ability, in a way, who cares? You get immediate feedback, and that's only going to make you better. So I think the notion of being iterative for YouTubers and creators is more about how can they get better at what they do, rather than how do they, stay in the shadows and not try because they're scared of what somebody will think. The very nature of the business is people will think and have a lot to say about what you're putting out there. But that's only going to make you better if you've got the right mindset, I think.
And that probably works then for people thinking about when they're pitching TV ideas or digital content ideas to people, is to take that mindset on and go for the 100 rather than sort of
100%.
Sort of water it down perhaps a little bit.
Totally. The other thing I'll say is that the nature of YouTube and content is all global, right? So we're pushed a bit by the Americans, and obviously the Americans are very, they don't care. They're all in. They're like, yeah, let's go for it. And also about things like money as well. I mean, this is another point. Commercialization. We talk a lot about business and about obviously the economics of TV and of content. But so much of that in the UK, I think, is also, hamstrung slightly by our very conservative notion of money and commercialization. Americans obviously don't. They go for it, man. I mean, they will sell anything to anybody. And I think we probably need a little bit more of that, because we're playing now in a global content economy which competes with them and, is on the same level. So, if you look at the Sidemen, things like Side Plus, it's a membership club we launched in 2021, £6.99 a month, $6.99 a year. And the Sidemen, they were willing to sell it and put themselves out there. And yes, there was a little bit of that British, are we going to get backlash for charging for something? But that's an insane mindset. Wait, what do you mean backlash for charging for something? Go to, speak to Logan Paul and Jake Paul, or whoever it might be ever in the States. They would never question charging for something, right? I mean, literally, Logan had, I think, a $24.99 membership club through Maverick Clothing, which was his clothing brand. And he just did like an Instagram post on that a week. I mean, he didn't care about charging for something, right? And I think we needed that at the time, and I think more of us need that now. And actually, that's gone on to become their most commercially successful thing that they've ever done. It's making them more money than their YouTube channel, 90% profit margin, got an amazing community around the world. And that's something that's been built off the back of them not being scared to just charge and say this is going to cost $6.99 a month, but we've justified it because of the value. And actually we got it right. And I think in the end, you know, you had people on Twitter at the time who were sort of backing up the price and backing up the value because they could see the work that had gone into it. So I think we need a bit more of that, actually. Yeah. And that's something that I'm glad that they've embraced. And I think it's been pushed a little bit by the American references because we have that right next to us all the time because it's all global, ultimately.
And I suppose audience expectation with the growth of things like Patreon, people are expecting to chuck coffee money, I suppose, if you will, at creators and things that they like. So it's sort of part and parcel of the world now, I guess.
Totally, but also audiences realize things cost money, right? It's not, I think in this country, no one wants anyone to be rich, no one wants anyone to make loads of money, right? But ultimately audiences, I think, value the exchange of, well, you're putting this out for me and this is gonna cost, you've got teams, you've got resources that are going into this, well, I'm willing to contribute and support that. And actually we found with Side Plus, that's deepened the audience engagement massively by having that relationship that's commercial. You have a base now in a way, not that it's sort of guarded, but you have a safe space, if you will, for the real fans who are willing to put money down, but also want that because they want to feel like there's a space just for them, and it's not in the same world as the kind of the comment trolls and the people who might be muddying, if you will, the fan base. So I think it creates a much healthier climate. You look at people like Joe Budden in the US. I don't know how many people know about his story and his podcast, but he's making $20 million a year from a podcast purely through Patreon. So he's done that entirely paywalled, and he built that based on his own kind of cult personality and the fandom he's made around himself. He rejected, I think, $100 million from Spotify to do it with them, to own it independently, run it through Patreon, and now he makes $20 million a year. So it's one of the best decisions he's made. So yeah, I think having more of that sort of American commercial mindset, genuinely, I think it's one of the best things we did, and I'm glad that they were willing to do that because it's unlocked way more value and scale, and it's helped them go from 1 person to 50 because you can't do that for free.
Yeah. You know? Let's turn our attention a little bit then on to sort of the telly landscape and how you see it. You've been part of the process that's built one of the biggest media brands in the UK. How do you see what's happening in television at the moment and your lessons perhaps from your experiences and what you think you can bring to it?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I play a role in the industry slightly where I go on like Edinburgh and so on, and I don't want to be the doom and gloom guy because I'm not, and I think it's about adaptation, evolution, but I think the numbers simply don't lie for the traditional model. As we all know, I'm not going to act like this is new news, yeah. But you know, what we do know is that linear's totally gone off a cliff for Gen Z and Gen Alpha, and it's not coming back. And I think that's the brutal sort of truth in the numbers that Ofcom and the rest are publishing. And I think we just have to be really honest with that. I mean, you look at the numbers, 75% decline in 10 years amongst 18 to 24-year-olds. That's total decimation. And I remember going in speaking when I was at YMU, which is a big talent management company. I was working there for a number of years. And you go and speak to ITV, you speak to BBC, and I think a lot of people had this idea that Gen Z, one day, they grow up, they'd sort of put their phones away, they'd be in their big houses with their 4 kids, and they'd be watching like Saturday night TV round the fire. And I think there was a genuine idea that would happen. Like, don't worry, guys, it's coming. Gen Z have grown up. I'm 28. I'm at the age, they were saying, around like 30, they'll be doing that. Like, what, Gen Z are not doing that. What houses, what family, And so I think that myth, I heard it multiple times. I think maybe the pennies dropped that that's not happening. There isn't that replenishment. It's genuine change. And that's exciting, but it's also a bit scary. So I think for me, the world that I've been in, I've always been in this space of sort of, content, publishers, et cetera, and that's become more and more, I think, prominent and moving more into the world of sort of longer form. You're seeing actually so much more opportunity, I would say, than ever for anybody to be able to build their own audience. I think if you look at how social media has evolved as well, it's moved way more towards content than it has more towards personalities. And that's a big shift that's been going on recently, right? So traditionally, you go back, you had like influencers, you had this class of talent, if you will, who had huge followings. It was very difficult to get up to that unless you had a cult of personality around you. Now that's not the case. Anyone here, if you know how to engineer content well for the platforms, and I would say content engineering is how I see social today, really. You can build IP, you can build an audience, you can take a show, scripted, unscripted, and you can find an audience for it if you know, and if you practice enough, I think, to learn how the platforms want you to make content and to put them out. And so you're starting to see successes. I mean, I always think, Amelia de Moldenberg and Chicken Shop Day, I was fortunate enough to work with Amelia 4 years ago. I brought her into YMU, her first management company, and I worked with her for a number of years on the show. And I just remember thinking, why still is no one else doing this? Because it's not about cost, right? She was putting together, I don't know, £2,000-3,000 for an episode. So it's not really cost. Development budgets are way bigger than that. So what is it? And I think it's the notion of, well, you can build a format and take TV in its sort of whatever that even means, and bring it to YouTube, bring it to social, and do it in a way that works for the audience here. And it can work if you go the distance and take the time. And still no one's really done it. And so that's a massive opportunity, and that's even easier today with Instagram and the way that that platform's developed especially. You look at examples, there's a show called Roomies at the moment by a company called Built. They're a credit card company, and they've made a scripted show in the States about these like 5 friends in New York. It's all done on Instagram. There's no reason why anybody here couldn't make that, right? I mean, you probably look at it and go, yeah, I know exactly how you could make something like that, and they're probably doing it for maybe $1,000, $2,000 an app. You look at, there's another good reference point, a good show called BK Coffee Shop. This is similar to Chicken Shop Day, but in a coffee shop. And that's now built to 150,000 followers. Each episode's getting 1.5 million, I think, if not more views. And that's a great bit of IP that's now incredibly valuable because I think a 21-year-old writer decided to make an Instagram show. But there's no reason why anybody here, no producer can't do that. You'll probably look at that and say, yeah, that's incredibly easy to make. We can go make that today. But it's the bravery, I think, to take maybe the delivery where it sits and be willing to try over here. Because actually, if you do that and you're consistent with it and you practice and you learn how to become good, because we're all going to be terrible at the beginning, you can build something like a Chicken Shop Date, like a Hot Ones. These shows aren't complicated, but no one in this world's playing in this world. And I really believe the minute that happens, the minute the penny drops, we can make shows on YouTube, we can make shows on Instagram and on social, and they can become something. The minute that penny drops amongst production companies, it's game over. Because you guys are the best storytellers. You have the resources, you have the money. You have more money than any of these kids will be sort of self-funding. So the minute I think that move happens, it's going to be a totally different world. I think we're at the beginning of that now, and I think a couple of years' time, the professionalization of YouTube, of social, of sort of premium content will just be right up there. Yeah. So I'm very excited actually about what that looks like. And the economics, again, they're way bigger than just commission budgets because you can do anything. Once you have audience, you can build IP that's totally holistic, like the Sidemen, like Amelia, etc.
I guess it takes that risk-taking in the first instance of believing in your product, whether it's a dating show, whether it's a drama on Instagram or whatever. It's believing in the product and willing to put a bet on that content, right? That this is going to work in the long run. And it might take a ropey 6 months or so, but eventually we've got faith that it's going to come right in the end.
100%. But also, if you scale it for the long term and you do it now, you're planting seeds from an IP perspective that might become a beautiful tree, but it requires planting it now. So I've been going for 11 years. Amelia's built Chicken Shop Day after the same amount of time, pretty much 11 years. So I think it's about being willing to plant those seeds for the next shift. Because as we know, this change in linear, and obviously we're seeing budgets move and the economics starting to fall down a little bit, but it's going to take a while. It's not going to be overnight. Not decimation, right? It's kind of like that, because we know they're not going to replenish. So the audiences will not replenish, and therefore, the economics won't work for the next generation as they come up. But how do you plant a seed now that in 5-10 years' time will be the IP of tomorrow for that generation where they're consuming, which isn't on linear, it's on demand wherever that sits, and it's on YouTube, it's on Instagram, it's everywhere, actually. It's holistic. I think that's key. One thing that I struggle with, actually, is the notion of TV. The concept of TV, I think, hamstrings the industry, because actually, you think about the BBC and others, they're so fixed on where it sits. And that hamstrings how you actually reach audience, because audiences aren't in one place anymore. They're in many different places. So really, it should be around content and around IP, and that's sitting holistically wherever it needs to sit in order to reach the audience. If that's Snapchat, if that's TikTok, if that's Instagram, if that's YouTube, it's everywhere. And that's fine, but it's not TV on, iPlayer or on, no disrespect to iPlayer, I love iPlayer, but not on iPlayer or on channel 480, wherever it might be. I think that is in itself, it inhibits the industry progressing, I think, to where the audience actually is.
Yeah, so how do you see then the role of, how public service broadcasting sits in a lot of this? Because that's the difficult one, right? Because I suppose a lot of the content we've talked about so far is largely driven by commercialization, right? It's working with brands, it's making cash that way. But if you're trying to make stuff for public good, which might not necessarily be the sexiest thing that's going to draw in an audience, how do you see that interfacing with this world?
I think it's really hard. I think it's hard for a number of reasons. One being that the replenishment, or the lack of replenishment, poses and the BBC know this, right, poses an existential threat to the BBC, because the younger audience and generation, they don't necessarily buy the argument that PSBs need to exist in the same way that the older generation do. And you can see this in license fee drop-offs. They're just going, well, why? My content world is global. It's, maybe I'm with Crunchyroll in Japan, or I'm with, I have Netflix shows that I love over here, or I follow my favorite YouTubers and creators there, but it's a global ecosystem. But also the notion of, and I talked about this on the Amal Rajan show, and I've said to the BBC, I spoke at their Content Leaders Day last year, and it was really good, because they were very open and willing to hear my view. I mean, who am I, right? but I did say I struggled to see the notion, the argument of a kind of British identity-based, vanguard being won over by Gen Z, because Gen Z don't necessarily identify with any British identity. That in itself is being challenged, the notion of Britishness. So therefore, what does the BBC mean for this audience? Because I think it's genuinely going to be very challenged. And so I think for me, it's more how can the BBC and others as well, Channel 4, same problem or same challenge, how can they become more like a VC? How can you be empowering British creatives? How can you be looking at who's starting to build? I look at a good example with Channel 4 and Amelia. They were speaking to Amelia years ago. We spoke and we connected the dots for her, and she did a documentary on Meghan Markle back when that was the whole thing. And I was like, that's the extent of the relationship between Channel 4 and Amelia. You had Amelia when Chicken Shop Date was on, 100,000 subscribers. It's now one of the biggest shows online in the world. Why did you not invest in that? Why did you not co-own that? Why did you not go on the journey with someone like her? If you see her as talent and you see that IP as having an opportunity to thrive, why was the conversation not more about partnership rather than, we can take Amelia, she can be a presenter for one of our shows and can sit on Channel 4 and go out at 9 o'clock on a Wednesday. Like, that was the conversation. And that's the bit that, for me, needs to change. Again, it falls down with the point of delivery, where it sits, because that's how it's all measured. And I think the minute that moves a little bit on, and it's less about where it goes, but more about the BBC, Channel 4 and others becoming empowerers and also like investors in content for the next generation of creators who are building IP, I think that's where it becomes more interesting. So I think that becomes more of the role. It's actually being a platform to support British creatives and being a platform through other vehicles and verticals rather than needing to own end-to-end the attribution. BBC's always been sort of pulled back around this idea of attribution. Everything has to show BBC, BBC, BBC. I think for the younger generation, do they really care? Is it not more about the content and the IP? And also, I know there's a big question at the moment around prominence. You mentioned it earlier, but around prominence. And I have slight issues with the notion of prominence on YouTube. And I've said that, I did a LinkedIn post about this the other day. I struggle with it because it suggests that the BBC can't compete. And in my mind, I go, well, why do you need to be ranked? Surely you should be making good enough content that it's seen anyway. And actually, the best thing about these platforms, they're entirely meritocratic. You will get seen if your content is good. But it's almost a submission. It's like accepting defeat. It's like, well, we need to be prioritized on YouTube. We need to lobby YouTube to put us at the top. But that, for me, is this, it's a bit of a, I think, it's almost a signal that you've already lost the game. You've not even tried to fight. And in my mind, you look at Miss Rachel, and I know that's a big challenge with the children's side. Look at something like Miss Rachel. You can't blame budgets. She makes that, I don't know if everyone knows Miss Rachel. Miss Rachel's amazing. She gets billions of views on YouTube. That must cost a couple hundred, I think her husband does it, and then maybe she has a green screen behind it that she probably bought on Amazon. Yeah. There's no cost attached. You can't blame budgets. So why are we not trying to compete? And I think it has to be a bit more confident, and it's got Britishism to it, that sort of cynical view, I think. So, yeah, that's another, I mean, we've kind of gone off there, but that's another point.
Interesting, but just to pick up that a little bit, I suppose the challenge with public service broadcasters, and there's a lot of public service broadcasting done here in Wales, is that when you start bringing news and current affairs into it, when there's a public role to inform and educate as well as entertain, that's where there's a challenge, right? Because suppose you could all make videos where we jump in pots of custard. I'm using a bad example, do you know what I mean? But sometimes if you've got to like make a program that is hard-hitting and holds government to account, for example, that's not necessarily going to get an 18-year-old to click on it. And so how do you try and make sure that that type of content was very important for sort of public good is still being made in a world where you have to compete against
Will they watch it anyway if it's not good enough? So for me, it's like for that example, there's no reason why that couldn't be so I'm shouting into this. There's no reason why that couldn't be a really great piece of content for a 15, 16-year-old if it's packaged in the right way, if it's distributed for them in the right way, if it's got good hooks, if it's got good storytelling throughout, and if it's made in a more social-first way. So isn't it more around learning how to make content for the next generation in the way that these platforms want, rather than saying, well, we're going to do our traditional approach to content and then force you to watch it because it's for your good, but they're not going to watch it anyway. And so I think for me, there's a balance. News, I understand, but I think no one would really question the BBC's role in news. But around entertainment, and this was on children's content. And with children's, I personally just struggle with the notion, and beyond that with entertainment as well, and unscripted, etc., that the BBC can't compete. The BBC should be the ones to compete, to be the best at this. You've got the resources, you've got the great people, but it's almost, for me anyway, maybe a slight submission of defeat before you've even started. And I'd love to see a bit more confidence, I would say, from PSBs to give it a go. Yeah. I don't think they have to. They have to give it a go because this is where the audience are moving.
One more question before we then open it out to the floor. If you've got any questions for Jordan. If you haven't, I've got loads more. But I've had plenty, to be fair, so it's your opportunity. What advice then would you give to the people in this room at the moment, where we're in this in this transition phase, like you talk about? There is more stuff. I think the BBC are open to commissioning more things for YouTube. We've talked about that this week. There is a changing world, but like you say, also telly is still pulling in big numbers for now. What advice would you give to people listening?
I'd say two things. One is think like a creator. It's like my pedestal. It's the thing I just like. I will die on this sword in the industry. Not properly. It's not that important. But think like a creator, right?
Is it your Instagram? Is it your your thing on Instagram?
No, but I really believe it. It's try and think like a creator thinks, and that means take more risks. It means try new formats. It means giving it a go. You're producers. You are content creators. You are. You just do it in a way that maybe isn't on YouTube and on social, but think more like a content creator today. And I think be brave enough, even if you're not even using the platforms, to try them, to get on them, to test shows and IP, to upload. Try and upload content yourself. If you are producers and creators and storytellers, you're here because you love storytelling. You're here because you love content. So there's no reason why those platforms shouldn't be somewhere for you to distribute and to make content on. Like, why are they only for a certain group of people over there when actually that's where eyeballs are moving for the next generation, and your brilliant storytelling is missing out on huge eyeballs by you not maybe feeling confident enough potentially to go there. And there's no reason why you can't. I'd also say don't neglect the older demographic that's moving onto YouTube and moving onto social. It's huge. And it's one of the biggest sectors actually of growth on the platform. So it's not just kids. Everyone is moving to an on-demand world where they are totally in control of their content consumption, where they watch and what they watch and when. So be there, be where the audience are, I think, and learn from creators, because they are leading the way, because they're forced to do it for their own survival. So you'll learn the best things from looking at what the Sidemen and others do, because they're having to iterate in order to keep their business going. So that's, I think, a good sign of where things will move. And I think just be up for it. It's a lot of fun, I think. And also, I'd say break some of the kind of budget expectations or ideas of what something has to cost in order for it to be good. I think YouTubers and content creators are the opposite, right? As I said, Amelia cobbled together £2,000, £3,000 for a chicken shop day. And she did that, self-funded it herself for years until she was able to get enough money to fund it through a brand, actually. And I think, if she can do it, why can't we in this room do more of that, more sort of self-funded risk-taking at a much smaller level? See what you can get for the least amount of money, and try, because that could actually build the IP that you're going to then turn into something much bigger in the future. And also, last thing I'll say, plant the seeds today for 5-10 years' time. I think all of us are a little bit behind. I think traditional linear broadcasters, etc., have been 10 years behind of this game. This isn't new, but plant the seeds now. I think many would love to have gone back to 2015, 16 and planted the seeds that will now become the chicken shop date or the Sidemen of tomorrow. So do more of that. Everyone can do it.
And so the horse hasn't bolted, then, John. This isn't too late to get involved.
Of course, and these things, change is never immediate. Obviously, like there's that sort of change porn. I think Mark Ritson used that phrase. I think it's a good phrase. TV's dead. I'm totally guilty of this. We're all probably a bit guilty of it, right? Because it helps to make things a bit more binary. But these things are always slow. There's always a lot of grey and overlap and time. And, for me, it's more about looking at the future, where the ball is going, is into a non-replenished linear world, but into a world that's totally on demand and is really everywhere and global. So go to where the ball's going and start that now. You'll thank yourself in 10 years.
Yeah, John, thank you very much for your time. Has anybody got any questions they want to put to Jordan? Or can I keep going? Is anybody? Yeah, question down here in the front. Diolch.
I'm going to be really selfish because I've got two questions, but you don't have to answer both. The first one is, I read that you had suffered from imposter syndrome when you were younger. I mean, you're still really young now, but so how did you overcome that, or are you still dealing with that? And secondly, what's the most under-discussed, is that a word, risk to the creator economy at the moment?
Yeah, so imposter syndrome, I think for me I was brought into YMU to be their chief creative officer, and I was like 20. So I'd had my own agency at 19, then sort of got Aqua hired in, and then I was there at 20. So it was just, sorry, is this better?
Yeah, that's good, that's good.
Sorry. So I went to YMU, big talent talent management company looking after the likes of, Anton Deck and Frank Lampard and Reggie Yates at the time. Sort of big ITV management, really. They wouldn't like me saying that, but it's kind of true. And I was there as their chief creative officer, but I was 20 at the time, so I came in, started working with them when I was 19, and then started there full time. So it was just this weird thing. If you've got a 300-person company, you've got me as this, now I know what that must have been like. Like, I would have slapped myself. I would, why, who's this kid? Like, who are you? Get out. But they were so nice and so accommodating to me and were brilliant. And I think it was just that learning, actually. And Mary, who's the CEO of IME, who's amazing, she sort of said to me really importantly that when you are almost an agent of change, you have to bring people with you. You really have to bring people with you. Otherwise, you're going to be ineffective. And I think when I started, I was very much in that mindset of, right, I'm brought in to push things forward. And I didn't have maybe the human skills or the diplomacy or any of that humility, really, to know that it's not just about me pushing forward, it's about pushing everyone forward by going more slowly, leading and going from behind, actually, and bringing people with you. So that was the biggest thing, and that changed everything for me. And then in terms of the second question, which is, the most discussed challenge to the creative industry at large, I'd say it's this, the economics being...
Creator economy.
Creator economy. Yeah, I would say within the creator economy, it's the devaluation actually of creators. Because when everyone's a creator, no one is, in a way. And so because now everyone has access to audience almost immediately, you have the situation where creators in what we call maybe the middle working class sort of stages are making less and less money. So creators aren't necessarily rich and making loads. Actually, they're making less because brands are going, well, hold on. If anyone can reach audience, this creator over here that might have 5,000 followers, 10,000 followers, I can pay them £200. And the creator that I was paying £10,000 for that might have 1 million followers is going to get less impact and less reach than the one that I paid £200 for. Genuine numbers. How does that make sense? The influencer marketing world, that whole bubble, I think is about to blow up. I don't think it cannot sustain that fundamental problem, which is that now that the platforms have moved to discovery, they've moved away from followers, the whole economic model of influencer marketing breaks because that's all been based on followers, really. So it becomes a race to the bottom. So I think a lot of those companies that are these scaled influencer agencies, this is kind of probably not overly relevant to you guys, but I think it's somewhat interesting. I think they're not going to last 5 years in the same guise unless they drastically shift. And you'll have this sort of premium cream of the crop, Sidemen and that kind of level. But then everyone else will, in a way, have to, I think, focus again on IP and on building formats and brands that can become their own economic world because they're not going to be funded in the same way by brand deals anymore. So brands are getting smarter. And also, I think brands are going to just become creators themselves. I think that's where we're going, actually. Because, again, they're going to realize, well, hold on, why am I needing to rent audiences over here that really, I have no ownership of the asset and I'm overpaying, whereas I can invest that money in my own channels, in my own brands, in my own IP. And so things like Roomies, the Built example, everyone should check it out because that's where things are moving. Think of something like, Apple TV Plus, right? Apple's a brand. It's not their main job to make content. Therefore, they can take great risks and do some of the best shows in the world and win loads of Emmys because it's a side project for them. And they're losing 250 million on it a year. They don't care because it's brand building and affinity. So I think brands will become creators, they'll become commissioners, they'll become broadcasters directly. And what happens to the middlemen and the rent and audience tier, which is a lot of this industry, I think they'll go. But that's exciting, I think, if you're focused on brands as the financial sort of point of value, really, which is why I think, again, a lot of the TV industry is going to have to move more towards brands, but also towards building your IP yourself and becoming a creator yourself. Because once you have audience, who cares?
That's really interesting, isn't it? Because a lot of people feel that they haven't got any followers, then they can't have conversations with brands or broadcasters and push the metal because they might just look as, you've only got a couple of thousand followers, you're not important. It's interesting that's changing. So that could be a game changer for people in this room. Question, Draven Hin. Hiya.
Hiya, that's a really good segue into what my question is. So I'm Jess, I'm from Espadrec. We're a Welsh language broadcaster across different platforms. But one of the things as we transition over to creating content platform specific, not just linear as a platform, is understanding the power or I suppose the challenge of marketing. And you just touched on influencer marketing there and the future of that. So I was going to ask you your thoughts on where does marketing and promotion play a role on when we're talking about different types of content on different platforms other than linear and the power of it, I suppose?
Yeah, no, it's great. So to that point initially, I do think that influencer bubble I cannot see it lasting. The other thing as well, everyone's regulated to the hilt, hashtag ad. I mean, who watches the hashtag? No one does. And even if you look at your own behavior, right, probably looking at branded content, anytime you see that, you'll just swipe. And that is just a sign of the ineffectiveness of it, right? And that's a regulatory thing. I think it's needed, don't get me wrong, but it has killed, in a way, the effectiveness of that moment where, oh, you could pay an influencer to promote something and people would probably buy it because they think it's authentic. So yes, that's a good thing, but it also kills it a little bit. I would say, so what was the first part of your question again? Oh yeah, marketing. So I would say the platforms are your marketing, right? So the platforms push good content. So they help content find its audience, and they're very good at it now more than ever. This is why this whole influencer marketing bubble is breaking and why anyone really can make a show and it can work. So I would say the challenge is not so much to rely on anyone external to market your show for you, is to basically test and learn enough to become good enough at making content yourself and building shows yourself on social, whether it's on TikTok and Instagram, etc., for the platforms to push it because you've engineered it to work. And basic social sort of 101 is, you'll know this, but platforms all want the same thing. They want people to go on the platform, to watch videos and to stay, because that's how they can serve them ad inventory. So there's 3 S's in my mind. It's for people to stop, for people to stay, and then for people to be satisfied. That's all your content needs to do. 3 S's: stop, stay, satisfied. And then your challenge is to become good enough at those 3 things. And that goes for YouTube, which is more intentional because, the stop element is more important really than anything. Of course retention's key, but if they're not going to click, then they're not going to go in. So it's all about packaging. Packaging is probably 70% of YouTube's challenge. But then it's about how do you become better at keeping people? How do you get them to stay? How do you make your storytelling more dynamic, higher retention? And then how do you create satisfaction through some level of emotion? So those are the 3 things I would say. Every social platform wants the same thing. They want users on the platform spending as much time as they possibly can on them. So if you do that, and if you become really good at getting people to stop or to stay, so that might be on TikTok and Instagram, the first frame, rather than the thumbnail and the packaging. If you're getting people to stay because your storytelling's good, and then you're satisfying them by giving them some emotional payoff, you guys are storytellers, man, come on, this is what you do. Then the platforms will promote your content organically, and that's how you're going to build audience. So focus entirely on that. Don't worry about, I think, any external marketing for that, because the platforms are so good that if your content is good, it will get seen. And the brutal truth, as we all know, is that they are almost too good at that, so that it shows that most of our content is just probably not good enough. And so we need to get better at making content, and that's the challenge. If you can do that, and that takes time and practice, then you'll get the biggest audiences you'll ever have in your life, I think, if that makes sense.
Right, Jordan, we are fast running out of time. We've got a minute left.
No.
We've got one question over here, and then I think we will call it a day, sadly, there. So, quick fire answer, if you don't mind.
Yes, sorry, I'll be quick.
That's all right.
From Rondo Media. Just a quick question. One of the Sidemen challenge is the real or AI challenge videos. Do you think generation beta, gamma will care if there's any difference between those two? And maybe just something about the kind of opportunities that AI is bringing for kind of content creation and finding audiences as well.
So, I mean, my personal take on AI is that in the real world, no one really cares that much. I think it's overhyped to such a degree. I think ultimately storytelling wins, people win, people, they want authenticity, they want flaws, they want vulnerability. That's everything that AI can't do. So the tools will be great and will empower creativity. They'll help creators. They're helping us with testing and optimization, data, research, those things, brilliant, right? Things that would just take brute time. But for creatives, it's the best moment ever, because ultimately great creativity will rise to the top because there's so much slop and trash out there that no one is engaging with and caring about. So it's like I cringe every time someone says, oh my goodness, this looks so real and this is in this AI video amazing. It's like, no, it's not. And it's not, right? Let's be honest. You're not really enjoying it. But what you're going to go to is the creator who's filming in their bedroom, on their phone, and it's done in a raw, real way. What I think it does do is pose a slight challenge to the notion of what premium is, actually, because premium could, in theory, be generated. But with the DIY tier of real and authentic content, that I think is going to absolutely rise to the top. You're seeing that even on TikTok, on YouTube, the kind of return to the vlog era. People want authenticity more than ever now. Great opportunity to make, I think, great connecting content at a lower cost than ever, actually. So, yeah, I'm optimistic, personally. Maybe I'm wrong, but I don't know.
Jordan, listen, diolch yn fawr iawn. Thank you very much for your time. It's been a
Thank
fascinating time with Jordan. Thank you. Top stuff, mate. You shoot off. Thank you, mate. Yeah.